The sun was high over the prairie, the kind of white-hot light that bleached the grass until it seemed almost silver. Dust drifted in thin veils across the land, carried by a wind that whispered of thirst and of endless miles. Out here, far from the town's heart, there stood a small shack pressed into the earth as though it carried the weight of grief upon its roof. Its boards were weathered gray, its windows clouded with age, its door loose upon its hinges. A woman sat inside, her body bent forward in the wooden rocker, her arms cradling a newborn pressed close to her chest. The child whimpered, its voice a faint mewling in the silence, and the mother hushed it with lips pressed against its downy head, whispering words not for anyone else, but for her own hollowed soul. "My baby don't cost much to feed," she murmured, her voice raw, as if every syllable had been rubbed against stone before it left her mouth. The words were part defiance, part lament, and part prayer. The baby rooted weakly, and she adjusted the thin blanket that had been her late husband's shirt, torn and re-sewn until it bore more stitches than cloth. The cradle in the corner sat empty, unused, because the mother could not bear to set the child down too long in a world that already seemed too cruel. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, and her lips trembled with more than fatigue. A sob escaped her before she could stop it, her hand flying up to cover her face. She pressed her forehead against the baby's hair, trying to breathe quietly, trying not to let her weakness echo inside the hollow walls. She was alone, and she knew the town's eyes had turned from pity to suspicion weeks ago. A widow so young, a child in her arms, no steady means to keep her alive. Whispers multiplied like weeds in every corner where women gossiped and men spat tobacco. The crunch of boots on dry ground outside startled her. She froze, rocking chair stilling, heart thrumming like a trapped bird. She thought at first it must be another neighbor come to stare, or perhaps the storekeeper who had once delivered flour on credit, but had stopped when he realized the credit would never be paid. She did not rise, fearing judgment more than danger, until the knock came, 3 slow raps, each one steady, as though the knocker believed he had every right to stand there. When she opened the door, the sunlight struck hard against her eyes. A figure stood tall, framed against the white blaze of day, hat brim casting a deep shadow across his face. His coat was worn, his boots scarred, his stance broad and unyielding. He was not the kind of man people invited into their homes casually. The town whispered about him too, in the same tones they used when speaking of graves that were not tended, something unsettled, something dangerous in its silence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep but edged with something rough, like gravel dragged along wood. His eyes, when the light revealed them, were gray with a touch of storm. He glanced past her into the room, saw the emptiness, the scraps of food, the rocker, the baby against her chest. A flicker of pain crossed his face, so quick she might have imagined it. Then his voice came low and certain. "You are coming with me." The words sliced through her weariness. She blinked, her lips parting in disbelief. "What?" she whispered, clutching the baby tighter, her heart a frantic thrum. "You and the child," he said again, firmer now, yet not unkind. "This place won't keep you alive. My ranch can." Anger flared beneath her exhaustion. "I can't just leave," she snapped, though her voice quavered under the strain of hunger and grief. "This is my home." His gaze stayed steady, not softened by her protest. "A home don't matter if it's killing you." He took one step closer, lowering his tone. "Your child's cry ain't something I can ride past. Not anymore." She stared at him, bewildered. He was a man she barely knew beyond the crooked half-glances exchanged in town, a man whose name traveled on whispers, spoken too quietly for her to catch. They called him bitter, said he'd loved once and lost harder, said his land was cursed by loneliness. She had never asked to learn more. Now he stood in her doorway, as if summoned by her sob. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the baby's restless fussing. Then, with a small sob that cracked her resolve, she gathered her courage and stepped outside, shielding her child against the sun. The town noticed quickly. Folks on their porches leaned forward, watching as the widow walked beside the solitary rancher, her baby clutched close. Murmurs slid like snakes between rocking chairs. Didn't waste no time. Already under his roof. Poor husband ain't cold in the ground." The words were barbs she could almost feel against her skin, sharp and cruel, though none of them were spoken loud enough to be answered. She lowered her head, but still she felt her cheeks burn with shame. He walked beside her, jaw set, shoulders squared, as though the whole world could throw its stones and not make him flinch. Still, she wondered if he felt their stares, if he too was scarred by the judgment. She wanted to ask, but the words stayed locked in her throat. By the time they reached his ranch, the sky had shifted toward afternoon gold. His land sprawled wide, fences broken in places, the corral long unused, the barn sagging against the horizon. Yet the fields swayed with tall grass, wildflowers scattered among them like flecks of sunlight, and the air carried the scent of earth richer than any corner of town. Inside the house, he set bread on the table, rough but fresh, and poured water from the barrel. She hesitated before sitting, rocking the baby in one arm while breaking the crust with the other. She ate with small, cautious bites, ashamed of how hungrily she wanted more. He sat across from her, silent, watching without judgment. When she lowered her eyes, embarrassed, he spoke softly. "No one goes hungry under my roof." The days began to stretch. He fixed a cradle for the baby from spare boards, sanding it smooth until it creaked, but did not splinter. She patched his shirt with careful stitches, turning worn cloth into something usable. They did not speak much, not of the past, nor of the whispers still swirling in town, but of simple things, the weather, the cattle, the child's name when she finally told him. He held the baby awkwardly at first, stiff-armed and uncertain, until the child's tiny fingers wrapped around his and refused to let go. Something shifted then, a crack in his weathered mask, as though he had been waiting for this small hand to remind him he was still alive. Yet the world outside did not soften. When she returned to town for supplies, women at the store leaned together, their words loud enough to carry. Some women find new roofs quicker than graves grow cold. The widow's spine stiffened, but she kept her gaze forward, though her throat burned with shame. He stood at her side, silent but taut, his jaw hard as stone, every muscle in him screaming against the cruelty he would not voice. Nights on the ranch carried their own kind of quiet. The stars shone fierce, the crickets loud, the baby's breathing soft as rain against her shoulder. Once he sat across the table, lantern light carving his face in sharp planes, and said in a voice rough with memory, "I don't remember what laughter sounds like anymore." She looked at him, her heart aching with recognition, and whispered, "My child will teach you again." But judgment pressed harder. A town elder came one morning, his words laced with polite venom. He advised her to think of her reputation, to leave before the scandal stained her forever. She stood in the doorway, torn between gratitude and humiliation, her eyes filled with helplessness. She gathered her few belongings, ready to leave the ranch that had given her both safety and shame. When she reached the door, he was there. His voice shook not with anger, but with something deeper, raw. "You think I care what they say? I'd rather walk through their whispers 100 times than let you walk out that door once." The word stopped her, frozen, tears welling. He stepped closer, his hand trembling as it reached for hers. His eyes searched hers, unguarded at last. "I never thought I'd deserve another chance," he said. "But I do now, and I ain't letting you go." That evening, as the sun dipped low and the meadow glowed with a wind that carried the scent of wild sage, she held her baby while he stood before her. His confession came slow, each word dragged from a chest heavy with years of silence. He told her he loved her, that he wanted her not as charity, but as the one who had brought life back into his house. She listened, her tears glistening, her heart trembling not with fear, but with recognition of the truth she had long buried. "I feel safe with you," she whispered, "and I don't want to feel safe with anyone else." He slid a ring onto her finger, simple and worn, a relic from his mother's hand. No preacher, no papers, no town's blessing. Only two souls binding themselves in the quiet of the meadow, with the child as witness and the wind as him. They walked back to the ranch beneath the painted sky, their steps lightened, their hearts changed. The ranch no longer felt like a place of sorrow, but of beginning. The baby cooed, as though to bless the union with its small, innocent voice. And in that moment, The narrator's voice lingers, as though from the edge of firelight, speaking not to the widow or the rancher, but to us, the listeners. Sometimes dignity is not found in standing alone, but in daring to lean on another. Sometimes survival is not shame but courage. And sometimes the bravest thing is to let oneself be loved again, even when the world whispers otherwise.